Are you kidding me? Try to be all fancy, set up the set. We're just gonna leave that as the intro. And then we're gonna say, hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to show you guys what my process looks like for editing in Lightroom. I saw some comments on my last video and on Instagram and stuff about like, how do you go about your photo editing? And so I wanted to show you what my process looks like, and then maybe you can learn a thing or two along the way. I'll show you some tips and tricks that I've learned just in my experience. So here, I have a graduation photo that I took for somebody, and I want to show you what I did to get the end result. This is the original. Can I undo my... Okay, so this is what I ended up with. This is the end result, but I'm going to show you how to get here in Lightroom. So we're going to take everything back to original here, and I always work from top down. The process of photo editing is, one, you want to fix any mistakes that you had in the photo. Then you want to start doing all the fancy stuff of like colorizing or doing tweaks to the photo to make it like stylistically different. And then you have like some finishing touches of, for example, like grain or dehazing or stuff like that. Like that stuff is like the little sugar on top, the cherry on top. Why would there be sugar on top? Maybe powdered sugar on brownies? Now I'm getting hungry. Okay, so we're gonna get into this going from the top to the bottom, starting out with our lighting effects. What we see here is that everything is very overexposed. So I am going to bring down our highlights and shadows, and that's gonna bring some good definition to the trees. We're gonna mess with this level. For the whites and blacks, we're basically just turning everything down. So maybe what I'll do is I'll bring the overall exposure down and then bring things back up. Maybe we'll do something like this. You can also at this point mess with the S-curve. Well, I call it an S-curve because most often you're going to put an S-curve on this. So I'm going to grab this highlight, grab this low light, and it's very over-exaggerated right now. But you can now tweak just the value of those, just the intensity of those values. And I'm going to lift the gray, lift the black point just a smidge so that it's actually not like absolute black. It gives it like a vintage feel, which I like. And I'm going to take that white value and also bring that down because of how overexposed it is. Now you could also go into the red, green, and blue curve at this point. If you mess with it, notice that it's not going to make a lot of sense until you do it to all three, and then it kind of balances out, and then now it's like, okay, now we have a little too much blue, too much purple. So I'm gonna go in here, something like that maybe. I think it needs. It's not like it needs more green. The green is almost too saturated, but it needs less purple again. Pulling that down, and now you can kind of see what we've done to the original photo. I'm going to go into the color and warm it up a smidge. Too much. Mess with the vibrance and bring that up. Here's an important difference between vibrance and saturation. Saturation is the overall level of all the colors. So if you notice, let's zero out vibrance here. If I bring up saturation to 100%, then all of the colors' intensity has gone up. So now you see like the orange of the flags is like really bright orange. The blue of her denim jacket is really blue, but also her skin tones are over exaggerated. The greens are over exaggerated, over saturated. So too much intensity from the color. Now I do want some of that, but not all of it. More so, I mess with Vibrance because Vibrance will increase the intensity of the color, but in a much more controlled sense. It increases some of the colors and tries to protect the skin tones more. So if I take Vibrance all the way up, you see that it's still way too much, but this is a different end result than what we did with saturation. So what you do with Vibrance is you can bring it to maybe like 25% here, plus 25, if I could get it. Maybe, okay, I guess we're doing plus 24. And now you have like a very rich green, a very rich blue there, very rich orange in those three areas, the denim jacket, the trees behind her, the flag to her side. So that gives it a nice saturated value for those colors, but protects her skin tones. I use Vibrance and saturation very sparingly. I think with all of my values here, as now that we're out of the lighting category, what you'll see is I do very micro adjustments because you want to be very cautious about just jumping from one end of the scale to the other. So we're going to take it little by little, and those little changes will yield us the end result that we want. So like here, the green, I think it's a little too much. So I'm going to grab the saturation on the green in this color mixer and bring that down, and that's going to help us. I'm going to bring the luminance down, which is the brightness of the green. I'm going to bring that down. Now her denim jacket is actually in between these two blue values, and so something I like to do, I'm going to grab my pencil for this, is by pressing this reference button here on the side, you can now click on the image and that'll change. It'll select that value. So then as you change the slider, it'll adjust the hue, it'll adjust the saturation, it'll adjust the vibrance, or sorry, the luminance when you change that slider. So if I click on her jacket and I'm selected on hue, now you can see on the right hand side, it is showing me what two colors it's between, and then I can slide that to wherever I want it. So if I want more of a darker blue on her jacket, then I can do that. I can increase the saturation on it or decrease the saturation on it. Let's make it brighter. So we're gonna grab the luminance and we're gonna take that brighter. And so now you see her jacket is standing out a little bit more. The saturation of the flag is a little too vibrant, so I'm gonna grab that and bring that down. Looks like it's between red and orange, but it's a good thing we're using this because now it's adjusting both of those together to get the end result that we actually want. So this is where you do all the color adjustments. We have now balanced our colors. I think it's looking pretty good. We're gonna go into the next area, which is the effects panel. These are kind of like the finishing touches that you do. So once you've done your lighting fixes, your color fixes, now you can go in and do the finishing details. So I'm going to put a slight vignette on the piece, making your attention get drawn in. The vignette, by the way, is this effect where you can slide it all the way down and you have a black circle that comes in from the edges. You could also have a white circle by taking the vignette all the way up. So you can have those effects, obviously in moderation. I'm gonna bring that down there. Sometimes what's good to do is if you want to see what these other adjustments do below it, the midpoint, roundness, feather, that all affects the vignette here. So I'm going to adjust the midpoint. You see how this is moving it in and out. So I'm going to move this in. Roundness, I want it maybe more like this. And then feathering, less feather, more feather. So I think actually right in between is pretty good. Maybe just something like that. And now I can go back and only have the slight amount that I actually want. Use texture, clarity, and dehaze very sparingly. A lot of people find out about the clarity slider and they just bring it all the way up. They use it way too much because it affects like sharpening, it affects contrast value, it affects like all the stuff. You don't want to overuse it. In this particular instance, I might do like a +3, but it doesn't even really need it. This is already a pretty sharp image. So texture and clarity both affect the sharpening factor of your image. You don't want to use this too much. That's why I only have like a +6 and a +3 on that. Dehaze, if you have a hazy image, this will take it out. What you want to be careful with is that this will affect your sky a lot. So you notice here it's not really doing much on the sky until we get to the really, really high values. But you'll notice it in some other photos that if you take the dehaze slider all the way up, then you will have this halo effect on the horizon, and that is not that's not good. That's not going to look good. So again, use dehazing sparingly. If anything, sometimes I add haze by taking that dehaze slider down. But for now, we're going to leave that there. Grain, sometimes I add a little bit because I think it adds a really cool finishing layer to it, giving it again this vintage feel that we got by lifting the blacks off of the darkest black point on the curve. We lifted that up, and then now here we have grain that also achieves that vintage look. We're gonna go there. Details, sharpening. Lightroom will automatically put sharpening value onto your photos. Here's what I always do with sharpening. I take the masking almost to like 80, 90. I take it way high because if you are working with the masking slider here, if you're adjusting the masking slider on iPad, if you hold down on the image, on desktop, if you hold down O while you're with the masking slider, you get into this view and you see this is what parts of the image are being adjusted with the sharpening slider. So in this particular case, I want to take it probably here to like 94, 95, because if there's any kind of post-production sharpening that's going to happen, I really only want it on like the edge of the subject or very, very few things. You can see here the masking is only affecting the subject, the edges of the bricks, the edges of the building, edges of the trees. Those are fine in my mind because you want to have the separation of the items. So bring the mask up so that sharpening isn't just sharpening everything in the photo. Noise reduction, color noise reduction. This comes more into play in low light photography. You want to bring this up. Again, watch out because in low light, a lot of what Lightroom thinks is noise is actually the details in the face and details maybe in the hair or whatever. So if you take noise reduction too far up, it'll start taking out details in the person's face that you took a picture of. So kind of be careful with the noise reduction slider, but you don't want, obviously you don't want noise in your photo. You want to have the clarity there, so find a good midpoint. I find that most often I'm around like 15 to 20 on my noise reduction, and then if I really need it, I'll go up to like 30 or 40. But by that point, it's affecting too much of the skin tones or skin features that you just kind of have to mess with the photo a little bit more in different ways. And largely, that's my process for editing my photo. The last thing I'll do is adjust the aspect ratio, the crop. So in this, if I wanted to keep this as a wide shot, then I would make sure that she's centered. So I'm gonna do this right there. So that's good. As you saw in the original, what I did here, let's get this ready for Instagram, 4x5. We're gonna zoom in. And this has a nice rule of thirds grid for us. But you can do this, and now use the rule of thirds to line up your subject, centered. Her head is on that first third level. Straighten. It was already pretty good. It looks like it's adjusted 0.04 degrees. And that's it. Now, the vignette, what happens when you crop in the photo is that it takes all those finishing effects and scales them down to what your crop was. So here now I see that like my vignette is a little too harsh. So I'm going to bring that back, dial that back a little bit. I'm going to go back into my lighting, maybe this one, the overall one. We're almost there. It has a little too much green tint on her hair. So I'm gonna show you a neat little trick that is in Lightroom that lets you really fine tune the edit you want on different parts of the image. So we're gonna go into this masking menu, and they recently, they just added this feature where you can select the subject and the AI of Lightroom will automatically scan the image, find the subject for you. It'll highlight in red like this. I add 2 of these. I'm gonna do add subject, and this time we're gonna invert. So now we have 2 masks on our image, one for the background, one for our subject. And the background, now I can adjust that a little bit better. Gotta be careful with this because you don't want it suddenly ruining the image. Now our subject really stands out on this piece because we have adjusted the background and the subject separately, and it gives it that dimensionality to the image. So here's our end result. I'm pretty happy with it. This is my process for all of my photos. Once again, going from top to bottom along this side menu, you start with your lighting and your color, fixing any issues you had, and then putting on the creative edit of like adjusting the color grade, adjusting what colors need to be emphasized or pulled back or anything like that, and then you put on the finishing details like the vignettes, like dehazing, like the grain. So I encourage you to take one of your photos into Lightroom and start messing with all of these sections. Go section by section, and if you need to, take the slider all the way to its extremes so that you can see what it does, and then pull it back to what effect you actually want, pull it back to the value that you actually want for that photo. I think that's a great way to learn. That's what I did, and that's why I want you to get in here and just start editing your photos. You can't learn just from watching these videos. I want to see what your photo edits look like. So yeah, tag me on Instagram and I would love to take a look at what you come up with. If you like this video, then be sure to hit the like button because it really does help this channel. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and hop into the comments. I love hanging out with you guys and talking about what different techniques you guys love to use. Like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you are not subscribed already, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See ya! It's always fun revisiting edits on photos because you always do things a little differently every time that you edit the photo. Which one do you like better? The old edit or the new edit? Let me know in the comments. Especially if you stuck around till right now, let me know in the comments.